A judge is set to hear closing arguments today in the Cal Harris murder trial in upstate New York. It's the fourth trial for the car dealer, following two reversed verdicts and a mistrial. Authorities accuse him of killing his estranged wife, Michelle Harris, nearly 15 years ago. Prosecutors say he did it to avoid a costly divorce settlement, but her body has never been found. This time the judge, not a jury, is deciding his fate. Let's bring in Yodit Tewolde, a former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney, and Anahita Saragatfar, criminal defense attorney as well. Welcome to both of you. Yodit, you've had three jury trials so far. Two of the first two were ended in convictions which were overturned. Next one was a hung jury. So you've clearly, as a defense team, you've been able to convince people on the jury to vote not guilty. Why turn it over to just one judge in this case?
But you also have to think about it in the reverse as well, John. You have a jury that has yet to acquit him as well. So depending on how he's been portrayed, Mr. Harris, in the media, you do want to go to a judge who is able to set aside the emotions that he may feel throughout this jury trial, or this trial that is, and actually look at the hard evidence. So you have three trials, yes you do, but you also had the first two juries convict him, and they were later overturned. But then you had a mistrial, which also tells you that there are people in the community that still believes in his guilt. So I think it was a smart move on the defense's end to go to the judge. The judge is supposed to ignore emotion, and very often juries are swayed by emotion, right, Anahita?
That's true, and I think, frankly, the fact that they opted for a bench trial here shows me that the defense is pretty confident in their case, because usually as a criminal defendant, you want to take your chance with a jury because all it takes is one juror. You need to convince one juror to side with the defendant, yet the prosecution needs to convince 12 jurors beyond a reasonable doubt of the defendant's guilt. And so the fact that they're leaving it up to the judge here shows me they're pretty confident in the case. And yes, judges typically, they're not swayed by emotions like jurors are, because they are used to hearing these kinds of stories. So they do tend to focus on the facts, on the evidence, just what's presented in the courtroom. So I think it'll be interesting to see if the defense made the right move here.
It's fascinating to me to see how these things are, develop. The judge in this case had to decide what evidence he would allow himself to hear. And one of the things he is allowing himself to hear, Yodit, is evidence that a third party may have committed the murder. Right, and this is only going to strengthen the defense's case, because now they're adding an additional reason for doubt, an additional reason to find Mr. Harris not guilty of this offense. And from what we know about this case, there was an individual who saw Michelle Harris in the day after the state alleged that she was murdered. They saw her a day after with this other individual, a hulky young man, and he's from Texas. And if the defense now is allowed to produce evidence to suggest that there maybe was another person responsible for her disappearance and maybe murder, then that only gives another reason for the judge to find that there is doubt as to Mr. Harris's guilt. Anahita, there's no body, there's no murder weapon. There was some evidence of her blood in the house, but, there's probably my blood in my house, too. It happens from time to time. And even the experts disagreed as to whether, that blood, whether there was evidence of trying to clean up that blood. So I guess the judge's decision, the judge's definition of what constitutes reasonable doubt is really going to be in play here.
It is, and I think there's a strong chance for acquittal here because, yes, he was convicted in 2 prior trials, but those verdicts were overturned by the appellate courts, and we know that doesn't just happen. I mean, in fact, that's a very high bar to get a verdict overturned, and the 3rd trial, it was a mistrial. There was a hung jury, and so, yeah, I really think it's up to the judge at this point, and it is a largely circumstantial case. As you mentioned, there's no body, there's no murder weapon, and the prosecution's star witness is supposed to be their forensic expert who opined about this blood evidence that was found in the crime scene. But guess what? He admitted on the stand that he was basing his opinion solely on photographs of the crime scene. He never actually went to the house and examined the house where this blood was allegedly found. And you also have this expert, the star witness for the state, admitting that he can't even opine as to how this murder occurred, when the murder occurred. So I think that's not a great witness for the state.
And
I think there's reasonable doubt here.
Harris's children children are supporting him. Anahita Setagatfar,
Yeah.
Yodit Tewolde. We'll keep an eye on it. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.